Live long and prosper, by the way. Man, I tell you, I don't know about you guys, but I'm really excited. I think that we've crossed over a threshold, a line of demarcation, if you will. And it's an exciting venture that I believe is in front of us. And you need to understand something. You're not here by accident. It's not a coincidence that you're sitting here this afternoon in the sound of my voice, or listening via the internet, or perhaps listening to the recording of this particular teaching. I believe that we're entering into a season when, if you look around you politically, economically, socially, you see that the lines that used to divide good from evil, light from darkness, have been so massaged that unless you have a perspective that's based on the Torah, predicated on His Word, light can easily become darkness, and darkness easily become light. So much so that the things, the values that we once held dear to, now will get you in trouble for even making a political statement or any kind of a personal revelation regarding how you stand, where you stand on those issues. And because of that, the earth itself is groaning and travailing. Romans chapter 8 tells us in the last days that the earth is groaning, waiting for the manifestation of the sons of Yah. Around us right now as we speak, from the natural, the earth is literally groaning. There are more earthquakes taking place right now than ever in recorded history. And you know what that tells me? That the sons of Elohim, the sons of Yahweh, are in the process of being revealed. Give Him a praise offering. You know what's important about that? The reason it's important is because when the sons step in, they have to reach an age of maturation where they're capable of taking care of daddy's business. And that means that there's a lot of work that has yet to be done here on the earth to stand against the wiles of the enemy. And He's raised up a group of individuals, a generation who are going to stand in His place in the earth and challenge those that would come against Him. Does that mean that it won't be fraught with calamity? Absolutely not. We're going to see calamity. Calamity is on the horizon, right around the corner. You can stick your head in the sand like an ostrich and hope that it'll go away. I'm telling you, it is not going to go away. Okay? Hard times are coming. Devastation is on the horizon. Economic, political upheaval is coming like has never been known in the earth. And yet Yahweh has raised up a generation of people, and He's entrusted you with having a place of sanctuary so that those that are going to be scattered because of what is coming, the upheaval that is coming, that you'll have a place of sanctuary where you can minister to their needs. I want to be in a position to minister to people rather than have to be the one who goes through the ministering process, because when that happens, then I lose the one that He sends my way. Does that make sense to you? I'm convinced that He's going to hide us in His pavilion. I'm convinced that He has places of sanctuary for us. I believe that there are places in Him that we will be able to run to when things get difficult. And if you haven't already found that in your personal spiritual relationship with Him, then you won't be able to understand what I'm going to share with you this afternoon, because there are going to be some natural places, physical places that Father is going to prepare for His people in the days that are coming. Now, most of you have been looking at what we call eschatology or end-time prophecy through the traditional lens of Christianity. I'm telling you, a lot of that you need to just set aside. Not that everything was wrong, but there's so much that we misunderstood because we did not have a fundamental relationship or a foundation in the Torah. Okay? Everything that you read in the New Testament needs to be measured against the Torah. If it's not, then you are taking things out of context and you're subject to delusion. And I'm telling you, there is a great delusion coming. Turn to your neighbor and tell them, don't be delusional. Okay? This particular teaching that I want to begin to share with you this afternoon, this is not something that I just tripped on and fell into over the last couple of weeks. As we speak, I've probably got 30 or 40 pages of notes regarding this, and I haven't even begun to scratch the surface. I've been working on this particular passage, this particular teaching for 8 years, and I could not get a release to begin to share it. It's only been within the last couple of weeks, actually a couple of months, I've been sharing with Pastor John, that Father began to speak to me about going back to these things and begin to open them up and he would begin to speak to me and allow me to hopefully unravel some of the mystery so that I could present it to you. What you do with it then is another matter, okay? I've spent hours looking at these enigmatic revelations, these hidden things, the mysteries that are deep within the verses that we're looking at. And I'm convinced that what you're going to see in this teaching today, Ezekiel, the book that Pastor was just talking about, is so misunderstood that I dare say no one has really approached it from a scholarly point of view to try and use it as a framework for end times. They'll take bits and pieces out of its context, and it's a compilation of about 13 to 15 different books. It's so misconstrued, it's so twisted, the dates inside of it. What you're going to see today, what I'll share with you this afternoon, is actually the end part of the book. But yet it's put in the beginning. I'm convinced that it's intentionally been mistranslated. And I tell you, Ezekiel was contemporary with Daniel. Daniel and Ezekiel and Ezra and Esther were all complicit in hiding the language. Zephaniah chapter 3 verse 9 tells us that he's going to restore that in the last days. And the reason that's being restored is so that you can see some of the things that you've looked at, these mysteries for generations, and not been able to fathom them. All of a sudden they're going to begin to be made plain in your sight. It's going to be like looking at something that had been in a fog or smoke, and all of a sudden the fog, the wind of the Spirit, the Ruach's going to blow it away, and you're going to be able to see things at the proper time so that you can step into the place that he has for you as an individual and then collectively as a body. Okay? What I want to look at are some of the things that are some of the most divisive subjects in the Hebrew roots community. And this particular teaching is going to explode your foundation, your particular point of view. I do not, at this particular moment, I don't care what your position is regarding Yahweh's calendar. You can be a lunar Sabbatarian. You can keep a regular 7-day weekly Sabbath. You can keep a sidereal calendar. You can keep a solar calendar. You can keep a lunar year calendar. I'm here to tell you what you've been keeping up until this particular point is wrong. Look at me and catch my eyes. It has been wrong. You're doing the best you can, and the reason that I'm sharing this with you is because it is written in history. It has been chronicled in science that the calendar has changed. Science will tell you that it's changed at least twice in the days of Joshua and in the days of Hezekiah during the 15th century. But I can prove to you from the scripture that it's changed at least, I found at least 4 different occasions, and it's about to change again. And so if Yahweh's going to change his calendar, I would submit to you that he's doing it for a reason. If I want to have a divine encounter with you, and I don't want every Tom, Dick, and Harry to show up, then I'm going to be careful. I'm going to hold the information close to the vest, because if it's sensitive information and I don't want the enemy to have access to it, then I need to be able to guard that. And yet I also need to know that the ones that I have who will arrive at that particular appointment can be trusted. Turn to your neighbor and ask them, can you be trusted? Come on, can you be trusted? We're going to look at some traditional misconceptions. Some of those have been deliberate, and some of them just unconsciously mistranslated because we didn't have the depth of them. How many of you are familiar with the Strong's Concordance? That's one of the best tools there is. It's been around for generations, and yet it is so shallow now compared to some of the things that Father is revealing to us that it's almost antiquated. Are you hearing me? And so what Father's doing now, he's revealing some insight regarding his language, his word, that is so amazing. That song we just sang about leaning upon the breast and hearing the heartbeat, you're literally hearing the intonation, if you will, the frequency of the heartbeat of Yahweh inside the master. And that same intonation can be heard and felt reverberating, boom, 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 inside the DNA of his word, if you want to lean there and listen to it. Okay? You can either be an individual who's in the sanctuary of Yahweh and prepared to minister to others who will come, or you will be someone outside the sanctuary who needs to go through a stage of preparation in order to get there. I would submit that if you're in the latter, you're not taking care of Father's business. I want to ask you something. We're going to go through a maze. And there are some blatant contradictions that have been inserted here, and I believe it's simply to obfuscate the truth for the generations prior and up to us so that they would not have access to the information that you and I have. And as he begins to reveal it, you're going to be held accountable for walking in it. This is the way. Walk in it. It was even said that had Satan known the true message or ministry or purpose of the Messiah himself, he would never have executed him. And so there were some things that was even held back from the prince of darkness, who has far more access, far more privilege, if you will, access to the word than you and I have ever thought about having outside the relationship with the Ruach. And so I want to ask you something. Are you willing to go on the journey necessary to dig this out? Say amen or oh me. You can leave now because we're going, okay? And so I want to ask you something. Ezekiel is a benchmark for end-time prophetic discussion. And what I want to do as we traverse through this, I want to help to, if I can, to unravel some of the mysteries and in the process expose some contradictions. Now, the first stage of this teaching is just going to be able to lay a fundamental foundation. Hopefully to kind of give you a platform from which we can launch into the deeper things of his word. And I believe that you can be trusted, or else you wouldn't be here. Let me just ask you this. What will you do with the trust of Yahweh? How many of you trust him? You can trust him all you want, but if you're not trustworthy, then there's an unequal relationship here. And so if you can trust him, and now he's allowing you the opportunity to be trusted, what are you going to do with this trust? Trust has to be earned, and as you earn it, you walk through it, you walk out it, this trust, and you demonstrate it in your relationship. And so these things that you're going to hear this afternoon, I'm going to challenge you. Weigh them out. Don't take my word for it. Weigh them out according to the word. I'm going to give you such an overwhelming preponderance amount of scripture that it's going to baffle you, stagger you, overwhelm you, over-medicate you, addict you, hopefully. And in the process, you'll go back, hopefully, and take this and search the matter out for yourself. Did you know that that's what you're called to do? You're called to search out the truth. How many of you want the truth? I saw 3 hands. The truth is what's going to set you free. Come on now. I am not a prophet, but by times I believe that there's a prophetical anointing that falls. And I'm telling you, difficult days are coming, folks. You've got a short window of opportunity to take advantage of it. Okay? The initial focus of the title, Ezekiel's wheel within the wheel. Say that with me. The wheel within the wheel. How many of you ever looked at this particular passage? The wheel within the wheel. I'm telling you, there's so much hidden here that you can't understand it. And yet, it's interesting because it's not just in Ezekiel. What you're going to see here this afternoon was just not alone in Ezekiel. If Ezekiel is so mystical and mysterious and so puzzling, and it takes you a mind that has the ability to cipher these things out. It's almost as if you've got to be a detective so that you can just go down below the surface and dig out the meat so that you can understand it. Well, this is not just in Ezekiel. What I'm going to show you this afternoon is in several places in the Old Testament and several places in the New Testament. We just never connected the dots. Okay? What I want to focus on initially are those beings that are described in Ezekiel 2 verse 9 as attending that vehicle that was referred to or described as a wheel within the wheel. And as you look at it there in Ezekiel 2 chapter 9, Ezekiel's having this powerful vision, and you may think he was hallucinating. Today would be a good opportunity for people to have, these open visions, because there's a lot of hallucinatory things out there, okay? I come through the era when there were psychedelic drugs. Man, if you wanted to get a trip, go just make you some tea from some of the wild mushrooms we had growing. Hello, somebody. Y'all know what I'm talking about. But this is not the kind of revelatory vision that Ezekiel had. This was something that the Ruach HaKodesh was birthing on the inside of him. And what he's about to do, he's going to be shown some things that were not for just his day, The things that Ezekiel is being shown, they are for you. You're the generation that this scroll is going to be opened up and spread apart, and the finger of Yahweh is going to point to some of these things and begin to explain them to you, and what you do with them is going to determine whether or not you survive. I'm not saying you're not going to make it into the kingdom. I'm just telling you, you want to survive and thrive while we're getting ready to go to the other side. Say amen. If you look, you find that their true purpose. Am I going too fast for you? I'm on fire. I've got 10,000 words that I've got to try and get out, and I told Brittany, flag me at 1 hour. Just flag me, not stop me, okay? The true purpose of these beings are to deliver to the prophet. The King James English says a roll of a book. The Hebrew language says a Megillot Sefer. Say that with me. Megillot Sefer. It comes from a Hebrew word with the letter mem that's prefixed in front of it, which means from or out of, the origin or source, a womb. The root stem, the Gemel Lamed Hey, listen to this, means to reveal, to uncover, to expose, to go into exile, to go into captivity. Do you know that when something is exposed in your life, that you can either be set free or exiled into captivity? Did you know that Yahweh's word will either cause you to go into captivity, whether because you're disobedient, or be set free? The original meaning of this Gimel Lamed Hey, listen to this, has the connotation of taking something and rolling it on to or committing trust to someone. So the very purpose from the jump here, Father's revealing this scroll, and he's about to roll the responsibility. It's not just on Ezekiel, because Ezekiel doesn't understand. He doesn't comprehend all of it. He's just the one who is scribing this day and putting it down. But what's happening is as he's beginning to reveal it, the responsibility is being rolled onto your shoulder, and the trust of Yahweh is being committed to you as understanding comes. And all you're getting, get understanding. The word for book, there's the word sefer. It's a letter of instruction, a document, a deed. Oh my goodness, your inheritance is on the way. Your inheritance is so commingled with the umbilical cord of the Holy Spirit to understanding what's written in this book, that if you can't comprehend what's written in this book, you're not going to access your inheritance. Well, I'll just be satisfied with where I'm at. Just give me a little cabin on the other side of glory. Just build my mansion. Listen to me, you're not going to heaven. Contrary to what you've been taught, you're going to be here on this earth, hopefully ruling and reigning with him. You might be in the barbecue section otherwise. It's an indictment. It's evidence. It's a scroll. It indicates to etch or score something with a mark. The individual letters, the Samek Pei Resh, listen to this. This blows my mind. It hints at supporting or sustaining something, as in sustaining a remnant. Where do you think the remnant is today? Scattered into the nations. Do you think that we're part of a remnant? Yes. It indicates also the remnant, which could have come from the seed of the rebellious house of Israel. So there is also part of those that can be trusted. And so it leads me to believe that Father's rolling his trust out onto the shoulders of those of the house of Israel that can be trusted. Ask your neighbor if they're trustworthy. You see how timid you were in asking that? You don't know them yourself. Think about that. Since the word Megillot, or the root of it, means a roll or a circle, which also indicates that it can reflect a generation, possible future generational influence on these end times. It's entirely plausible that Ezekiel is being shown that there would come a day when an exiled, hidden remnant will be born out of the womb of Torah, the womb of this book. And it also indicates that there's a letter of instruction and a title deed along with it that'll be there for the remnant that will have access to this understanding. And along with that understanding and this information will come an X that will mark the spot, the location of where your inheritance will be, the divine appointments to show you where you should be when Father's pouring out His Spirit, and the places of protection and sanctuary that has for you as a people. Oh my goodness, we've got to get this. We have to grasp it. Immediately then, you can see that the purpose of this visit by these seraphim is to reveal the plan of Yahweh. I'm doing my best to slow down. To reveal the plan of Yahweh in rolling away the future captivity of His people. Notice the italicized words. Your captivity will not be rolled away if you cannot be trusted by Him. And what's happening is that there's a written plan that's being shown to Ezekiel. But there's a deeper meaning that's embedded in these words, these instructions. And it seems as if these plans, listen to me carefully, Ezekiel and what Ezekiel was shown in this vision proves that these plans were intended to be hidden for a season until the trusted ones arrive. That strikes me. Because never in my life have I been faithful in anything except for when Abba gave me an opportunity to teach His Torah. I failed at everything I ever set my hand to do except for teaching the Torah. I don't understand it. I don't deserve it. It humbles me because without His anointing, I could not do what I've been called to do this afternoon. And it seems to me that He's given all of us the opportunity, in spite of where you come from and whatever you've been through, He's given you an opportunity to take on your shoulder the title of a trusted one. And it's ironic because there are some people out there, even in leadership, that are saying you can't find people to trust. And Yahweh's saying, on the other hand, that I do have a remnant that can be trusted. And these things are going to be revealed at a specific time frame. Listen to this. Listen to this. Specific time frame, specific future meeting places and dates. And listen to me. And even, I believe, 42 different stages or rendezvous points where protection, sanctuary, sustenance, and instruction will await those who understand. In all you're getting, get understanding. How many of you remember the tribe of Issachar? David surrounded himself with men out of that tribe because there was something peculiar about the tribe of Issachar. It was said of them that they had an understanding regarding the times so that they could share with the people what they should be doing. Do you hear what I just said? Do you know what Yeshua said to the Pharisees and Sadducees? He said, you can look out there and you can see red sky at night, sailor's delight. Red sky in the morning, sailors take warning. You can look at it. That's what it says. The skies are lowering. Go back and look at it in the King James. He said, you can read those signs, but you can't even read the seasons that Father's revealing to you that's taking place right now. Oh my goodness, we are so blind. We are so naive. The enemy knows far more about what's about to happen to those of us that call ourselves believers than we do. I don't want to be run up into a wreck and let the devil do the driving. If I want to wreck this thing, give me the steering wheel. Are you listening to me? Oh my goodness. Ezekiel 2 verse 9 has 32 letters in it. And I thought, I like to look at those things because it's an alphanumeric language and there's connections. 32 happens to be the numeric value of the word kavod. Say that with me. Kavod. You can see that prominently in Proverbs 25:2. Listen to this, because I'm about to serve you an indictment. Okay? How many of you know what an indictment is? Okay. It is the glory of Yahweh to conceal a thing. It's His glory to conceal what you are hearing right now. But it's the honor, the kavod of kings to search out the matter. Did you hear that? It's your honor to search out these things that have been concealed. Now, Job takes it one step further in Job chapter 3, verse 23. Job says that a man whose way is hidden does not know how to escape calamities. But I'll just trust God. You know, I believe in blind faith. Faith is not blind. Come on. The individual that has a relationship with Yahweh, even though you may go into calamities, Yeshua said it this way, in this world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world, and so shall you. You may go into calamity, but there's no reason for you to stay there. The very reason that some of you have stayed in the junk that you've been in for such a long period of time is that he's been trying to teach you a lesson, and you need to be sitting in the corner on a stool with a dunce hat on. I got a teacher sitting right there. She knows it. Take them to the principal's office. That's what we need. We stay in these things so long because we refuse to learn the lesson. And now the lesson is about to intensify. Oh, you ought to be on your seat. Let everything be judged in the mouth of at least two witnesses. I believe that these living beings that Ezekiel's seeing in this vision that are attending this wheel within the wheel are here to confirm, affirm the book. Is it possible that Ezekiel is seeing in this first chapter far more than just these spiritual beings who are delivering a simple scroll? Is he being shown the will or the way that Abba is going to use to preserve a future remnant? If so, what is the connection of these spiritual beings and this scroll of the book, and what is their purpose? Is it surprising if I tell you that there's a cover-up that begins right here? The living creatures. As we set the stage for further confirmation, it's acknowledged that Ezekiel's Hebrew name is a compound word formed from the two words chazak and el. Literally, chazak el. It's literally translated as the strength of Elohim. It is said that Ezekiel is the son of Buzi. Say that with me, Buzi. Which this boggles my mind. The translators, this is Ezekiel's daddy. The translators translate his name as my shame or contempt. Out of his shame and contempt, he burst the strong one? I don't think so. The root of his name comes from the Beit Zion root, which is the same as the name Boaz, the strong one who comes. And as such, the father of Ezekiel, the strength of Elohim, should have been rendered the strong one, because he is talking prophetically about who's going to issue forth out of his loins, known as Ezekiel, and that's why you should understand when these things are written, you need to go back and begin to scratch way below the surface and dig these things out. And it's not an accident. I want you to listen to this, because this vision takes place at a peculiar location. It takes place by the Chabar River. Say that with me, Chabar River. In Hebrew, it's Nahar Chabar. If you look at the definition in Hebrew of the word Nahar, it means a light or a beam, something that burns, shines, or flows. While the word Chabar indicates, listen to this blew my mind, because this vision of this wheel within a wheel is taking place here at this Nahar Chabar, and it means a length of space or continuance of time, to augment or to add to a quantity or a number by binding them together. I don't think you understood what I just said. Actually, what's taking place right here is it seems as if there's a collection of dates being assembled into a calendar by these messengers, these Melachim of Yahweh, and this calendar is being revealed to the strong one who comes. Well, why would we need to know Yahweh's appointments? Now, I understand it's being given to Ezekiel, but this message is for you, this generation that's being raised up. Don't you think you need to know what Yahweh's calendar is? So that if there's an opportunity to be there when he shows up, that you'd like to be there? Hello? The word kibar can indicate in an adverbial form already, in the sense of future events deriving from ancient patterns long established. So there's something that's happening here in this vision that has already been established long ago, and yet it has a future import indicating that what's about to take place in the future has already happened and been predetermined long ago. Now that's kind of makes you scratch your head when you hear that. But it's interesting, if you take and rearrange the letters of Kibar, you get the word Bakor, which is a Hebrew word for firstborn. And so it sounds as if, listen to me carefully, I know I'm going to step out on a limb. It sounds as if what is happening right here is that time has been suspended by the appearance of these Melachim, and Ezekiel is in what we would refer to as a time warp or a black hole. Time has been suspended, and these living creatures are now either they're in the same dimension as Ezekiel, or they brought Ezekiel into the same dimension where they are, where time stops. Time was created for man, okay? Because man was at one time not limited by this physical body, and man could just think something and be there. Are you listening to me? Well, I don't know if that just sounds like something otherworldly. I don't know if that's, science fiction. I don't know if I understand it. Go back and look in Ezekiel 3:14, and it seems if you read that, Ezekiel is literally picked up physically and translated by these living creatures, and he's brought to a group of people who are in captivity, and he brings a specific message to them. And Ezekiel states that he himself sits there literally dumbfounded for 7 days, and he's surrounded by people who are also looking at what's happened, and they're dumbfounded for 7 days. If you're sitting by a river, and you're sitting there doing like the Cole Haynes used to do on Hee Haw, gloom, despair, and agony on me, deep and dark depression, excessive misery. If I had luck at all, I'd have nothing but bad luck. They're sitting there wallowing in their captivity, and all of a sudden Yahweh drops a prophet in their midst. He just boom, right there. What would you do? What would you do if Yahweh trusted you enough to pick you up and turn around and drop you into the private assembly of the United Nations with a word from Him to direct the affairs of man and say, "Thus saith Yahweh"? Or what would you do if Yahweh was to pick you up and set you in the meeting with the governor at the state capitol and say, "Yahweh is telling you, if you don't turn, this is what's about to happen"? I don't know if I believe that. Well, your belief system is limited because you don't believe your God's big enough to do for you what Ezekiel is going through here. What was the purpose of these beings? Do you think maybe that they were to expose a dimensional portal or a gateway? Do you think maybe that they were involved in some kind of time travel? The Bible's so boring. It's just so boring. Well, I got news for you. Enoch found a portal. Moshe found a portal. Elisha found a portal. Yeshua found a portal. Paul found the portal. Philip the evangelist found a portal. Every one of those individuals were in a certain location, picked up and translated for a season into another place, and it was witnessed and documented. That's way more than 2. And we can't believe Yahweh to move us into a time when we're going to be trusted by Him to be allowed to move into a place of sanctuary at His will and discretion and direction. How do you think that if the days of calamity are heading your direction, how do you think you're going to be able to survive unless Yahweh opens up a doorway for that to happen? Hello, have you ever thought about it? Am I the only one that's ever wondered, what are we going to do? You just were afraid to take the medication. The definitions that I just gave you, Nahar, Kibar, seem to indicate that there's a hidden reference again to the strong one, the light who burns, the firstborn who comes at a future date. And if you look at the combined numeric values, this blew my mind. The combined numeric value of Kabar, Nahar Kabar, 477. And it's not an accident. That's the same numeric value as Et Hayonah, the sign of Jonah. I don't know. That doesn't mean anything. You remember when Yeshua's questioned about proof that he's the Messiah? He said, I'm going to give you a sign. Remember what that sign was? He said, I'm going to give you the sign of Jonah. And immediately what you think about is those 3 days and 3 nights that he spent in the grave, like Jonah spent 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a whale, a fish, right? But did you know that the word Jonah is actually the word dove? And so the sign of the dove was seen all the way back in Genesis chapter 6 through 9 when you see the flood taking place. And the first thing that happens after the flood at the apex of Mount Ararat, Noah takes a dove and releases this dove, this Jonah, and this Jonah goes out 5 different times and finally comes back with an olive leaf in its mouth. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, maybe there's a connection here. Do you realize that in Revelation chapter 12 that we're told that there's another flood coming on the earth? Not a flood of water, because Abba gave us a sign that he would never do that. But there's a flood of words that's going to issue out of the mouth of the great dragon. And that flood of words is going to do everything it can to inundate and overwhelm the woman and her son. And so I would submit to you that if you don't understand what we're about to share with you, that sign of Jonah, which needs to be released in the aftermath of this great flood of words that's coming, you're going to miss that. And it's interesting because there are certain of the rabbis that say that the reason that the dove went out and brought an olive leaf was because he went back into the only place where the flood didn't touch the earth, and it was in Gan Eden. And so he brings out this olive leaf to Noah to remind Noah that I'm going to take you back to Gan Eden. I'm going to take you back to the garden of appointed times, which is exactly what Eden means. I'm going to take you back, put you on a calendar, set things right, put you in a fixed location where you'll have access to my word. And then he goes on to prove that with the signs that he gives to him. That ought to get you excited. It seems to me then that this is a prophetic picture of a future redemption and restoration of Israel as the firstborn of Yahweh, and possibly even more incredibly, the timing for this event. You believe you're part of the firstborn of Yahweh. You believe you're part of that remnant. Let's look at these living creatures. Can we do that? Yes. They're vividly described as having stunning features. How many of you have ever looked at these living creatures? If you read what it says in the King James English, it says that they've got 4 faces and multitudes of wings. And it leads you to believe that there's some monstrous entity. But I can prove to you that they've been revealed in several of the places, and the translation here in Ezekiel is wrong, okay? They're described as having the face of a man, lion, ox, and an eagle. And if you don't understand Scripture, you'll not recognize that these same descriptions have been shown you all the way back in Genesis and will be seen all the way in the book of Revelation. The same vivid description of the man, the face of the man, lion, ox, and an eagle. And it's not an accident that these 4 faces correspond to the 4 cardinal points on the stellar zodiac in the heavens. Did you hear me? Have you seen these creatures before? If you study them, you'll see that they're related to the standards of 4 of the tribes of Israel as they were aligned around the tabernacle. The standards of these 4 were the man, lion, ox, and an eagle. And so there's something regarding this vision that Ezekiel's being shown that connects with the standards of the house of Israel. Each tribe was assigned to a stellar month. 12 months, 12 tribes. Did you hear what I just said? and they were aligned around the tabernacle. Our mind, when we start trying to comprehend that, immediately you have the configuration of something that's in a cross-like form. And then in the center you would have the tabernacle of Yahweh. That's the way the conventional artists and scholars look at it. Are you still with me? And I want to stipulate something before we go into looking at this, that if you remember looking at the scriptures, Yahweh tells us that the tabernacle was given to Moshe, the pattern of the tabernacle was given to Moshe after a pattern in the heavenlies. Am I right? And it's my opinion, and I believe that it cannot be refuted. But if you think you can, I welcome the challenge. I'm convinced that the tabernacle represented the throne of Yahweh, and therefore would have been the central hub. How many of you know what a hub is? You ever seen a wagon wheel with the different spokes, and right in the center was the hub that the axle goes through? The tabernacle would have been the central hub, the throne of Yahweh, the dwelling place in the stellar luminaries, just like his heavenly throne would have been demonstrated in the pattern, the same pattern in the tabernacle. And just as surely as his throne would have been surrounded in the heavens by the celestial bodies, if the pattern was to be consistent, the tabernacle would have also had to have been of necessity surrounded by bodies in the person of the tribes of Israel that would have represented those same celestial luminaries. Is that making sense? Smile and nod, or we're going to have to back up and start again. Okay? Simply put, each face, the face of the man, lion, ox, or eagle, would have represented a standard or ordinal point. Okay? Like, say this, north, south, east, and west. See there how simple that was? And if that's the case, it would seem then if they represented one of the compass points or ordinal points, it would also have had to represent a compass point. And you need to remember that the compass, how many of you have ever seen a compass? Did you know a compass has 360 degrees? The compass is depicted as having 360 degrees. And so if that's the pattern, the circle in the heavens would have a necessity had to have been in a 360 degree circular design. And if that's the case, and that's the pattern that Moshe was given, I submit to you that our traditional views of a rectangular tabernacle may not be correct. I believe that the view of the tabernacle should fit that of the heavenlies, and we should have a circular design for the tabernacle in the wilderness, with the children of Israel encircling it, and everything else that had to do with that circular tabernacle pattern would have had to been revealed in the furnishings in the tabernacle, in the accoutrements or the vestments of the high priest, or it could not be consistent with the pattern that Yahweh gave him in the heavenlies. How many have ever thought about that before? Pretty powerful. Do you know what the tabernacle was called, the tabernacle in the wilderness? How many have ever read the scriptures when it talks about the tent of meeting, the tent of the congregation? Have you ever heard that? The Hebrew phrase is Ohel Moed. Say that with me. Ohel Moed. The word Moed is first seen in Genesis 1 verse 14. And it's used to describe the stellar luminaries, the sun and the moon and the stars. And they're said that they were put in the stellar heavens to regulate the Moed or the Moedim, the holy appointments. Y'all see that, right? Don't be distracted, because the enemy would like for you to get distracted so that you'll miss this. If that's the case, almost every time you see the word Moed, it has to do with the divine appointments of Yahweh. And yet they translate it, this word Ohel Moed, as a tent of meeting. Why didn't the translator say, no, this is the tent of Yahweh's divine calendar or divine set appointments? Why didn't they say that? That's the way it is consistently translated. And if they had translated as the tent of Yahweh's divine calendar, and it wasn't a 360-degree design, then every day would have fit a 360-degree year, one day being a degree, and it would have been cyclical, and everything that would have happened when they went into the tabernacle with an opening for the fire of Yahweh to shine on it, or the pillar of cloud to rest upon it. Every time that the sun would move, Moshe would know exactly what time it was. He would know exactly where they were in the children in the wilderness, because it would have been a divine compass. They could have never gotten lost. How many of you know where you're at? How many of you know where you're going? Wouldn't it be nice to have something, a pattern that was handed to you by Yahweh, so that you know exactly where you're supposed to go, when you're supposed to go, and what His plans were for you in the future, and to know that when you get there, there are 42 stations in the wilderness that He has reserved for you, so that you can be protected in the interim while the rest of the world is going through calamity. Is it? Does that make you scratch your head? The phrase Ohel Moed has a numeric value of 156. You know, that's the same gematria as the word Joseph. Have you ever heard of the Joseph generation? You know what Yosef means? Yah will do it again. Turn to your neighbor and tell him He's going to do it again. You believe that? Well, can I ask you something? Who do you think He's going to do it with? Hello? It's probably going to be somebody over there. I don't know if you can trust me. Say amen right there. Trust got to be earned. But it's not an accident, because 156, the numeric value of Ohel Moed and the word Joseph, it just so happens that it's the same numeric value as this phrase Ezekiel. And so there's a connection here. There's a connection here. And it's interesting because it was the tribe of Joseph. Listen to me very carefully. Because of all of the talk that you hear around the nations about this third temple that's being rebuilt, the focus on Yahweh and the promise of Yahweh has always been not the third temple, but the restoration of the tent of David. Do you know where the tent of David resided? It resided in the territory of Joseph. Joseph is one of these fixed signs. Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin being part of the house of Joseph, the 7th, 8th, and 9th month on the Hebrew calendar, they would have been stationed under the sign of the ox, also known as Taurus, the bull. In Hebrew, it's the word shor. Are you beginning to see a pattern? Do you want to know more? We'll come back to some of that, but I want to revisit these standards for just a second. Let's look at the word for man, the man, the lion, ox, and eagle. Is this intriguing to you, or is it just me? I've been looking at this for 8 years. This is a compilation of thousands and thousands of hours digging and not having an understanding. And all of a sudden, Yahweh taps me on my gourd and says, now I want you to begin to look at it, because you're going to get a chance to release it to the people. The word man there in Hebrew is the word Adam. It's associated with the tribe of Reuben. Reuben's standard was underneath the man. Reuben is translated as, behold, a son. He was situated to the south of the tabernacle. With him were the tribes of Simeon and Gad. Simeon from Shema, meaning here. Gad, normally rendered as a troop. But listen to this. The root of the word Gad comes from a root that means something that's painful and troublesome. An invasive cut, surgery that's being done in order to reveal a treasure. Sometimes Yahweh has to cut you, circumcise you, in order to reveal a treasure on the inside of your heart. Did you know that the first Adam had invasive surgery? Listen to me carefully. And I'm not talking about just what you think about him, Yahweh reaching into him and pulling out a rib. I'm not talking about that, because He took the DNA of Adam out of him. But what happens is that He's creating physical bodies for the Adam and a physical body for Eve. And the reason that He's doing that is that He's creating two physical bodies, and he puts them in the garden of appointed times where there's a different dimension of time. Isn't that amazing? Because the man, how many of you were born in around January 29 under the sign of Aquarius? Anybody? Now I want to share something with you. Most of us, when we start hearing about these zodiacal signs, because of our traditional viewpoint, we're taught don't mess with that. It's occultic, it's pagan. Listen to me. The pagans are smarter than the vast majority of believers because they understand the significance of it. They just took it and twisted it and perverted it. It's a proven fact from Genesis forward that Yahweh used the stellar luminaries to put a message there that could not be obfuscated or changed. It would be there fixed forever. And if you ever had a question about the plan of Yahweh for you, yourself, or your family, all you had to do was to orient yourself according to the position of the luminaries in heaven, and you would never go astray. So much so that for generations people have understood that if you wanted to navigate, there were certain positions that you could take even at nighttime based on the fixed position of the stars. Are you seeing that? This man is Aquarius. He would have occupied the 6 o'clock position. I don't know if that really means something. How many of you remember when Yeshua is about to celebrate Passover, and his disciples come to him and say, hey, where are we going to have the party? Where are we going to have Passover? We're going to celebrate it. Remember? And he says, what I want you to do, I want you to go towards town, and I want you to watch for a man bearing a pitcher of water. And you've heard people say, well, it's kind of an oddity because the women bore the water. No, it's an oddity because this man bearing a pitcher of water was the sign of Aquarius. And he sends his Talmudim, who are the two fishes, the house of Pisces, and they're going to prepare for the Passover, which would have been the sign of Aries, the lamb. It's the same progression that you see in the solar or luminaries, the zodiacal luminaries that you see in the heavens. And Yeshua's pointing to that, and he's trying to realign the stellar calendar and the clock for us right there. Are you listening to me? I don't know if I believe that. Honestly, I don't care if you do or not. I want you to wait until you hear the information before you make a decision. Let's look at the lion. Strong's number 738 is from the word Ari, belonging to the tribe of Yehuda. It's oriented to the east. The word here is rendered lion, but the root stem hints at a violent plucking or a gathering. What other tribe has been violently plucked and yet violently gathered? Yehuda. It's also cognate with words that indicate a flaming altar or a holocaust. What other tribe has went through the kind of a holocaust type experience like the house of Judah? This is strictly an accident, right? Yehuda means praise, but it also indicates to cast something, to stand in front of and make your declaration. I will praise him. This is interesting because they have with them the tribe of Issachar, translated as he'll bring a reward or recompense, but they were the ones that had privy information regarding the signs so that the children of Israel would know when to do whatever they were charged to do. And then Zebulon was there with them. Zebulon means to endow, to bestow, or to glorify in the process. They would have occupied the 12 o'clock position. Finally, you have the ox, translated shore. Say that with me. Shore. That's what we say back in Mississippi. Sure, you can do it. From Taurus, the bull, belonging to the house of Joseph, specifically Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin. They were situated to the west. The word shore is defined as an ox, but yet it hints at to turn around, to circumvent, to traverse in a journey. And it indicates in the process to traffic in merchandise, and it's curiously related. Listen to me, this is important, because it's related to the Hebrew word shir, which means a song. And I put here in italics, do you think maybe, I'm just going to ask you, do you think maybe that the house of Joseph would become the praise and worshipers of our day and also become the one who's responsible for teaching the Torah to the nations? I got news for you. Judah, you've dropped the ball. You're not teaching the Torah to the nations. The house of Joseph is teaching the Torah to the nations. Could the house of Joseph hold the key to the restoration of the nations? Could the house of Joseph hold the key to the timing of the restoration? Could the house of Joseph hold the key to where the location of that ingathering is going to begin to take place? You know what Zephaniah chapter 3 verse 17 says? It says, Yahweh will joy over you with singing. And the Hebrew word for joy there is gil. It means to encircle you. He will literally dance around you. I submit, if that's the pattern in the heavenlies, that's the patterns in the earth. Hallelujah. We need to get this thing right if we want to expect to go right. Final sign of that four ordinal compass point group: man, lion, ox, and now the eagle. The word eagle here is translated nisher. It's interesting because it's not always, in fact, more times than not, it's actually translated as a vulture rather than an eagle. It means to lacerate, to bite, to rip and tear. It was oriented to the north. The wider extent of this word indicates, like I said, a vulture instead of an eagle. And it's actually kind of curious because this sign, the sign of the eagle, is associated with the tribe of Dan, Asher, and Naphtali, which would have been the 10th, 11th, and 12th months. The dark months of the calendar. They're associated, oriented to the north. And I thought, isn't that interesting? Because Drago, the dragon, Revelation chapter 12 says that he will draw 1/3 of the stars with him. How many have ever heard that? And you thought that that's just kind of a fig Newton of your imagination, that Yahweh just kind of sticks those kind of things in there. If you go back and look at the way that the constellations are aligned, the constellational sign of Drago, his tail literally entwines 1/3 of the stars from polar north down. And he entwines these 3 months known. Even the ancients understood that the dark months, the winter months, they were the season of darkness. It's interesting because if you look at the word Dan, it means to judge. Here's interesting. Dan also had a peculiar sign. Dan was, his standard or emblem was kind of twofold. It would either be the serpent or the lion. I thought, isn't that interesting? Because when you go back and look in the book of Revelation and in Chronicles, Dan's not mentioned there in the list of those that will be gathered in the end days. And some say, I'm going to throw it out, some say that from the tribe of Dan will come the Anti-Mashiach. And I thought, isn't that interesting? Because you have the serpent king rather than the lion king. You have one who is a usurper. You have one who is a counterfeit. One who is an archetype. Can you see that? Then you have Asher. It's normally, that name's translated as happy, but it means to go straight. And as you go straight, it indicates that you're about to set something right. Are you hearing me? That's what we've been called to do. And then finally, you see the tribe of Naphtali. That name comes from a root that means patal, which is usually translated as wrestling. But it comes from a root that means, listen to this carefully, to intentionally twist and to be cunning and crafty in your twisting. Scorpio is the constellation that's associated with this particular sign, and it sits at the 3 o'clock position. Are you hearing me? Is it possible, because of what we read with those definitions of those names in the sign of Scorpio or the eagle, that there's an inference through their names that at a future day, that the specific times or the faces of Yahweh's eternal clock is going to be cunningly twisted? And though once judged is correct, Yahweh is sending a remnant who's going to set the thing straight. How many of you have ever had to go and adjust the hands of a clock? How many of you have, you're almost connected to your cell phone and you're looking constantly at what time is it? What's the time? And there's never been a generation like the generation that lives right now. We have every device at our disposal to give us more time. We have microwave devices that's supposed to shorten up cooking time. We have all kinds of electronic devices that should speed up your traversing between appointments so that you don't waste time. You have all kinds of other electronic devices in your house that should free up time, and yet we become more and more in bondage. And I thought, isn't that amazing? Daniel chapter 7 verse 25 says that the anti-Mashiach will come and he will massage the time, seeking to change the times and the season. And the purpose for that is so that he can bring the saints into a place where they will be weakened and worn out. That's not going to apply to me. Daniel chapter 7 verse 25. Listen to this. The Aramaic word that's used there when it says that the anti-Messiah will think to change times and laws, it's actually mentioned twice, times and times. It comes from the Hebrew word Eden, ayin dalet noon, and it's recorded as time here. Listen to me. But it also comes from a root, Strong's number 5708, the word Edah. And that word Edah is connected to the monthly menstrual cycle or appointed time of the female. How many of you ladies know that there's an appointed time on a monthly cycle when you need to be careful where you're at and careful what you're doing? And how many of you men know that when that appointed time comes, you need to be careful where you're at and careful what you're doing? Say amen or oh man, it's the truth. Isn't it amazing that when the enemy is talking about changing the times, there's something related to the monthly menstrual cycle? Do you realize the ayin vav dalet root indicates to duplicate, to repeat, to testify, to turn, to return, to turn something back? And so literally what's happening here, I got 1 minute, my hour's done. Can I have a little more time? Do you realize what's happening here? Do you realize that the enemy is talking about adjusting the clock? Let me just share something with you. It is an established fact that before the institution of these lights here, these counterfeit lights, that the gestational cycle, the menstrual cycles of the female were regulated by the position of the sun and the moon, that in specific locales when the ladies were gathered together, that all the ladies' cycle would be regulated, and they had tents that were set apart, domiciles that were set aside for them, and they would go into those protected places, they would go into those holy places, and they would spend that 7-day cycle contemplating the fact that there was inside them the demonstration of the death, burial, and resurrection of the Messiah taking place in their life, and the husband should be able to submit to that and say, oh my God, there's a cycle of life that my lovely bride is going through. I need to have respect there. I don't need to intrude into a place that's holy. But did you realize that the man, lion, ox, and eagle is set on the calendar, and it's at exact the same time that the gestational cycle, the ovulational cycle of the woman would be taking place? I can prove it to you. That ought to blow your mind. It don't take much, but it should. That ayin dalet root for Eden is the same as the word for Eden, the garden of appointed times. The location of the first tabernacle or dwelling place of Yahweh. Listen to me. It was in Eden where the first menstrual flow occurred. An indicator of the death of the seed and the renewal of life. The very purpose of the shadow pictures depicted by these living creatures and their 4 cardinal points reflect the menstrual and ovulational cycles of the female, the bride. And I have to ask you a question. If that's what's happening, do you think maybe that at some point in time that there's a foreboding potential for these signs to tell us that if we don't get the calendar right, that we will be exiled outside the Garden of Eden again, outside the Garden of Appointed Times? But if we get the signs right, if we understand the ovulational or menstrual cycle, gestational cycle of Yahweh's calendar, that we can be back in the Garden of Appointed Times, back in the place of intimacy, ready to receive the seed of Yahweh's word and duplicate it in the earth. Ooh, it ought to. It ought to. Say amen. Y'all have had enough of the alignment. We'll look at it a little more later. Are these familiar faces? Man, lion, ox, are they familiar to you? By the way, if you look at what the King James English and so many others, you can go back and look at some artist rendering and it's just mind-staggering. But I can prove to you that these same beings that are depicted here by Ezekiel, that they were actually inside the temple and the tabernacle of Yahweh. Pictures of them were there. This is not a description of a new set of beings. It's actually a class of beings called the seraphim, and you can see it in Revelation 4, verse 7 and 8, and in Isaiah 6, verse 2. And they each describe them differently than what is translated in King James English. In Ezekiel, they're described as having 4 faces. But in Revelation and in Isaiah, they're described as each having a face and 6 wings. Isn't that odd? Do you think that maybe there's a subtle attempt here in Ezekiel to convolute some of the things that are here in order to hide it for a season? Are you hearing me? Let me read to you what it says. I'll back up. Ezekiel 1, verses 6 and 11, it talks about, and everyone had 4 faces, and everyone had 4 wings. Thus were their faces, and their wings were stretched upward. 2 wings of every one were joined one to another, and 2 covered their bodies. The Hebrew rendering is ve'arba'a panim le'achat ve'arba'a kanafim le'achat lacham. And if you translate it properly, it should read, and each of the 4 had a face, and each of the 4 had wings. Panim is the plural word, yet it's translated both face and faces. And so context should have helped the translators, but they were not consistent here. Panim is generally translated as face, but it also comes from a root that means to turn, as in evening turns to morning. It's indicating a cycle. And everybody in the Hebrew roots movement will say, you know, Hebrew and our history and our culture and our language is cyclical, while English is linear. You ever heard that? And yet they don't connect the dots here. It indicates a passage of time. The 2-letter root, the pay noon pon, indicates a corner, an angle. And this is where it gets interesting. Can you hold on a little while? An angle is when there's a carpenter right there. He knows the difference between a right angle at 90 degrees, a 45-degree angle, 22-degree angle, which is half of 22 and a half, which is half of 45. You have to know those kind of things if you're going to circumscribe whatever it is you're cutting to make it fit. An angle is simply 2 lines that when they converge together, these 2 lines here converge right here. Are you hearing me? The same with these faces. Those that are attending this wheel within the wheel, this hub, their faces point towards the hub. And the hub is the center point where the angles that are depicted from these faces being drawn would converge. Does that make sense? The 4 faces describe, each one of them describe a 90-degree angle. What is 4 times 90? Excuse me. Somebody help me with the math. 4 times 90? 360. Isn't that odd? You have 4 angles, 4 90-degree right angles form a circle. 12 and 3, 3 and 6, 6 and 9, 9 and 12. Can you see that? Each one of those 90-degree angles extend outward to the edge of a 360-degree circle, just like the face of a clock. It's in the front of you. Right there's a clock face, 12, 3, 6, and 9. If you divide it up into 90-degree angles, you got 4. 4 times 9 is 36. Can you see that? It's interesting because you have the numbers 3, 6, and 9 interspersed throughout the calendar of Yahweh, and these 3, 6, 9 numerals are said to be the key to life. And if you understand the 3, 6, and 9s, everything literally to do with the timekeeping of Yahweh. You have an hour divided into 60 minutes. You have a 60 second, an hour divided into 60 minutes, a minute divided into 60 seconds. Are you seeing that? You have a month divided into 30 days according to Yahweh's way of reckoning. And by the way, when Yahweh changes the calendar, it's going to go back to a 360-day calendar to match. I'm telling you, it's going to match the construction of the cyclical tabernacle. And the purpose for matching the construction of a cyclical tabernacle is so that we can be back on the timepiece of Yahweh. Are you hearing me? I don't know if I believe it. Hold on. Reserve judgment. These numbers are connected to the ancient solfeggio musical frequencies that heal, deliver, set free. Isn't that amazing? How many of you would like to be at the right place at the right time to receive healing? How many of you would like to be in the right place at the right time for the hand of Yahweh to drop a financial blessing on it? Put you in a place, if you're here at the right time, somebody will be there with money in their hand to bless your socks off. Some of you have never had your socks blessed off. I've had mine knocked off because it was just, my mouth would stand this agape like a 4-year-old gopher hole, and I'd be, how in the world is Yahweh going to do this? And all of a sudden, He would send somebody my way to drop something in my life that would change us at the moment it was needed. These are divine appointments. You need to be at the place that He wants you. 12 tribes, 12 months, or 30 days, 360-day calendar, or solar processional. The length in the years for the zodiacal procession is 2,160 years. 2,160 divided by 360 is 6. Man's tenure on earth is approximately 6,000 years. Divided by, or times 360 equals 2,160,000. Man's days are numbered at 120 years at Genesis chapter 6:3. 120 times 3 is 360. 120 times 56,000. The diameter of the moon is 2,160 miles. Strictly an accident that Yahweh's trying to get it through our thick skull that He's about to change His calendar. Except the days be shortened. Now, He's not talking about taking a 24-hour days and making it 16. He's talking about taking a currently 365 point something year and bringing it back to a 360-day year. And when that happens, it will take the cycle of the moon, which currently sits at 29 point something other, and bring that back to a 30-day year. So you have 30-day months with a 360-day year. The regulation of the cycles of Yahweh will be such that everybody on the face of the earth will start arguing over who's going to celebrate the festivals at what time. And we can all be at the place where the divine appointments are carried out. And that's the place of sanctity. You know why it's important for you to be at the Feast of Tabernacles that's coming up? Yeah, we may be off a day or two because of the calendar being changed, but you need to be in that place. We're going to be there for weeks, so we're going to be in there sometime.
That's right. That's right.
Have you ever stopped and looked at what? Do you know what one of the Torah portions that are read during the Feast of Tabernacles? Zechariah's thermonuclear war. When he has the vision of this, it talks about a woman with fire, but it's actually, if you go back, it's a vivid description of a thermonuclear explosive device. And it's read during Sukkot. Isn't that amazing? Wouldn't you like to be at Sukkot at a place of sanctuary? By the way, the word Sukkot literally indicates a circle or a booth, a place where you can be inside the sanctuary of Yahweh with a fence around you while all hell may be vomited out on the outside. You're in the intimate place with Him. Say amen. Amen. Can y'all hold on? In Isaiah 6:2, they call these beings the seraphim. It's translated from seraph, meaning the word seraph is translated as serpent, but only in the sense of a fiery, poisonous bite. Listen to me carefully. The word seraph actually indicates something that burns quickly and is wholly consumed. And so these beings literally could be referred to as the burning ones. And isn't it plausible that if they are a fixture on the 4 compass points of Yahweh's pattern in the heavens, that they could literally be a blazoning lantern or a light fixture so that it would illuminate the direction or call attention to the specifics not only of their location, but where you should be at a given point of time? And it's not an accident. These burning lamps that these 4 seraphim represent, guess where they're seen? All the way back in Genesis chapter 15. Verse 5. How many of you remember that? When Abraham is having an argument with Yahweh, you know, you promised me a seed. How many of you remember that? You promised me an heir, and I don't have one. All I got is old Eliezer here, and you promised. And Yahweh said, whoa. Take him outside, shows him the stars, and he says, count the stars. I know what you're thinking. Well, if he counts all that, he's going to have a lot of children. No, the word for count there is the word safar. It literally means to take a reckon and read what's written up there, and that's depicting what's going to happen with your children. The message is up there, but I'm going to share something with you. Abraham was not arguing with Yahweh. Abraham was making a declaration because Abraham was a friend of Yahweh. Abraham was a trusted one. And I'm going to show you that we misinterpreted Genesis 15 verse 5. Are you ready? And it says, and he brought him forth abroad. You see, I didn't wait on you to say you were. And he brought him forth abroad. That's not a woman. He just took him outside. And he said, look now towards heaven and tell the stars. The word tell there is the word safar. And it says, if you be able to number them. And then he says, unto him, so shall your seed be. In other words, if you can comprehend the message that's up here, Abraham, your children will be accordingly. In other words, Yahweh's giving you the same message. How many of you have your word in your hand? Look, right there, your descendants are written. If you can read that, your children will be just like what you read. Don't you understand that? That's exactly what Abba told Abraham when he carried him outside. Are you with me? But I want to show you something. Abraham, previous to that, looks as if he'd been arguing with Yahweh. He says, oh, wait. He says, you know, I don't have an heir. All I have is this steward, Eliezer from Damascus. How many have ever read that? Do you realize that the word steward and Damascus have the same root? It's the word masak. Say that with me. Masak. And so instead of reading, I am childless, I have no heir, that's not what it's saying. He's literally saying, I am childless, and the masak, the son of possession, the heir of my house is, El is my help, Eliezer. El is my help of Damascus, the heir of my throne. Let me read it to you. He is telling Yahweh what the prophecy that Yahweh had given him earlier had said. He says, Yahweh, I am currently without a physical heir, but you promised that the son of possession, the heir of my house, would come from Eliezer, who is the heir of my house. You see what he's saying? Abraham is saying, Father, I don't have a son at the moment, but you promised me that I would have a son who would become the heir of my house. And he's telling him that he would be like Eliezer, El, who was the helper's son of possession. So he understands that the son that Yahweh promised him was going to be a prefiguring of the coming Messiah. And Yahweh says, you got it, dude. Let me take you out and show you exactly what I'm going to do. And he tells him, he says, look at the stellar luminaries. I want you to count them. If you can count them, your descendants will be just like I've written before the foundation of the earth. Yahweh's telling you the same thing. If you can believe what's written, let me just take you outside. What you should do this evening, once it gets dark, you should go outside and should look at the stellar luminaries. You can't read the message right now because you haven't been spending time understanding it. But the message hasn't changed. You should walk out tonight and look at the stellar luminaries and you should say, Father, the plan of salvation and redemption for my house has been written by the fixed hand of Yahweh. You know something? Those things don't move. They don't change. The rest of the planets move through a cycle. Are you hearing what I'm saying? Yahweh's word is immutable. It does not change. How many of you want to see what needs to happen for your family to take place? It's not an accident that in this same chapter, Abraham offers a sacrifice. Abraham's not capable of walking through the sacrifice. And so who walks through? Smoking furnace and the burning lamp. The burning lamp, just like the blazing, burning furnace and lamp that we were seeing attending the vehicle of Yahweh, walks between the pieces. And it's interesting because that same burning lamp seen here in Ezekiel chapter 1 verse 13 always shows up when Yahweh's about to form a house. Mount Sinai, when the mountain was on fire and they were thundering and lightnings. Go back and look. It's the same word for burning lamp. The burning lamp was on the Mount Sinai ready to build a house. The burning lamp is seen here in Ezekiel. The burning lamp is seen in Isaiah chapter 6. The burning lamp is seen in Revelation. And every time he shows up, his purpose is to build his house. I'm going to try and get finished if you can give me a few more minutes. The word Shin Pei Resh, the letter Shin Pei Resh, Seraph, when rearranged, they actually give us the root of the two midwives, one of the two midwives that attended the children of Israel when Pharaoh wanted all the children killed, Shiphrah and Puah. Shiphrah is defined as brightness, to glisten, to shine forth as dawn. She was one of the midwives there in Exodus chapter 1, 15 through 22. This is interesting. It was said of Shiphrah and Puah. Puah is translated as a splendid mouth, one whose speech is splendid. And because of their faithfulness in bringing forth the sons of Israel with their bright, shining speech, Yahweh promised that he would make them houses. And he wasn't just talking about, I'm going to go out now because you've been faithful. They already had a house. He wasn't talking about going and building them a physical dwelling. He was talking about generational houses. And it's interesting because what they were doing was the same type and shadow of these seraphim. The seraphim had their houses being depicted in the stellar luminaries. And here you see these midwives of Israel standing there to continue to propagate the lineage and the inheritance of Israel, following the same patterns that you see in the heavenly circuit above. And so I want to challenge you to some unconventional thinking. Can I do that? Yes. Even though we're talking about the faces of these creatures, we really can't understand how important it is without looking at the tabernacle design. Exodus 25:9, verse 40, Hebrews 8:5. The tabernacle pattern was designed after a heavenly pattern. The word is tavnit. It's rendered pattern, but elsewhere it's translated as likeness, form, similitude, and figure. Tavnit comes from the Hebrew word banah, to begin to build, to repair, as to begin to build a family name. The Beit Nun Yod indicates my son. And so it's indicating, in my opinion, that the pattern was established in the similitude or the form of his son. And we've taught for more than a decade that the tabernacle was designed in the form of a man, but what exactly was his form? And I'm convinced that the pattern will be built simultaneously as the generational house of Israel and as the tabernacle is being built. Almost all scholars will stipulate to a rectangular, traditional construction type for the tabernacle and a cross-like alignment of the tribes around it. It's my opinion, based on what we read here with Ezekiel's wheel within a wheel, the faces of the creatures, the connections to a specific tribe and month, each of which is connected to a constellational house within the canopy or the circle of the heavens, that it makes it much more likely that the tribal camping alignment would have been more like the face of a clock, following a circle just like the sun would traverse a circle seen in Psalm 19. The sun makes a circuit through the heavens. And that word circle there in Psalm 19 is tekufah, which means a revolution, a turning, a course of time, which all point to a simpler circular pattern. So why then, I'm asking you this question. We're getting ready to close. Why then, based on the evidence I presented to you, and I challenge you to go back and look at this evidence, make your own position, come to your own conclusion, but I have to ask you this. Why then would we have a traditionally accepted rectangular tabernacle within a circular alignment, which is a square peg in a round hole, when there are 360 degrees in a circle? And that's the pattern. A 360-degree circle is the pattern. I have to ask you a question. You think maybe there's been an intentional effort to hide the true tabernacle construction? I want to show you a statement from the Talmud. Not everything in there is bad, but some things are there to teach you a lesson, and I'm going to close with this. Rosh Hashanah 24b. Abaye replied, the Torah forbade only those attendants of which it is possible to make copies, as it has been taught. A man may not make a house in the form of the temple, or an exedra in the form of the temple hall, or a court corresponding to the temple court, or a table corresponding to the sacred table, the shulchan, or a candlestick corresponding to the sacred menorah. But he may make one with 5 or 6 or 8, but with 7 he should not make, even of other metals. You see what's happening here? We fixate on the menorah, but it seems to me like we're being told that you can't make something after the form of the original tabernacle temple pattern. I'm convinced that Solomon's temple also would have been in this circular design. And so Yahweh's revealing these things to us for a reason. And this is just part 1 of a several-part series. And I believe that Yahweh's revealing it for a purpose. I will show you proof of when the calendar changed. I will show you that it changed. Genesis 1:14, Genesis chapter 2, Genesis chapter 6. I will show you where it changes with Moshe. I'll show it where it changes with Joshua. I'll show you why. Yahweh told the children of Israel in Exodus chapter 12, wait a second. This will be the beginning of months for you. I'll show you why. How many of you have ever wondered why Yahweh did it? I'll show you. I can prove to you why he did. All he did was take and realign the calendar. I will show you why Noah was given the sign of the rainbow. I will show you what Yahweh's trying to do with the restoration of his calendar, the restoration of the divine appointments. And if you can grasp it, Yahweh wants to show you some things in your own personal life so that we can line up properly. Do you want that? Yes. Hope you've enjoyed this teaching. Shalom Aleichem.